The more days passed, the more intense the strange occurrences became. It started small, lights flickering in my house, the TV turning on by itself, objects moving just out of the corner of my eye. At first, I tried to brush it off as paranoia, the after effects of our night in the asylum. But when I woke up one night to find muddy footprints leading from my front door to my bedroom, my heart nearly stopped. The door had been locked. No one should have been able to get in. Yet there they were, large, wet footprints, just like the ones we'd seen in the asylum. I called the others, frantic, desperate for reassurance that I wasn't going crazy. Sam was the first to admit that things had taken a turn for the worse at his house too. He had started seeing shadows in the corners of his vision, always lingering, always watching. Emma and Megan were terrified, claiming to hear whispers at night, whispers that sounded like the voice we'd heard in the asylum, telling them to leave, telling them they weren't welcome. Jack, ever the skeptic, tried to dismiss it all, but even he couldn't explain the deep scratches that had appeared on his car, like claw marks, the very next day after we'd watched the footage. We decided we couldn't just ignore it anymore. We had to go back to the asylum, to figure out what we had disturbed and how to stop it. It was a terrible idea, but we were desperate. So one rainy evening, just like the night we had first gone, we gathered our gear and set out. This time, though, it wasn't for fun. This time, we knew something waited for us in those halls, something dark and dangerous. The moment we crossed the threshold, the air grew heavy, oppressive, like it knew we had returned. We retraced our steps, flashlight beams shaking in the damp air. Every sound, every gust of wind sent a shiver down my spine. And then, we reached it, the hallway where we had first seen the shadow. The door at the end of the hall was still ajar, as if it had been waiting for us all along. But this time, when we stepped forward, it slammed shut with a thunderous bang. The lights from our flashlights flickered, and in the sudden silence, we heard it again, that same voice, clearer now, echoing through the walls, "You shouldn't have come back." There's something about abandoned places that stirs the imagination. You tell yourself it's just old buildings, brick and mortar, long forgotten by time. But deep down, you know there's more. Something lingers in the air, a heavy, oppressive presence that sends chills down your spine before you even set foot inside. That's what I felt when my friends and I decided to explore the old asylum on the edge of town. It had been closed for decades, ever since a fire gutted half of it back in the late 80s. Rumors swirled around the place, whispers of unspeakable experiments, cruel doctors, and patients who never made it out. But as high schoolers looking for thrills, those were just stories. We were there for the adrenaline rush, to prove to ourselves we weren't scared of some crumbling old building. The 5 of us, Sam, Megan, Jack, Emma, and me, huddled around the entrance, armed with flashlights and a cheap camcorder Jack had brought to document our adventure. The moment we crossed the threshold, I felt it. That shift in the air, the thickening atmosphere. I tried to shake it off as nerves, but as we ventured deeper into the asylum's labyrinth of dark corridors and rotting walls, the feeling only grew stronger. The place was a maze. The more we walked, the more the narrow hallways seemed to close in on us. The walls were lined with peeling paint, exposing brick beneath, and the smell of mold and decay hung thick in the air. Our footsteps echoed off the tile floors, giving the illusion that we weren't alone, that someone, or something, was following us just out of sight. "Do you think anyone ever really died here?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I heard some patients were never the same after they were admitted," Megan replied, her flashlight flickering as she spoke. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to admit that my stomach was already in knots. Every shadow seemed to move, every gust of wind sounded like a distant scream. We reached what must have been the central wing of the asylum. Here, the walls were charred black, the aftermath of the fire that had consumed this section all those years ago. The roof had partially caved in, leaving the room bathed in eerie moonlight. "That's where they kept the worst of them," Sam said, pointing to a set of rusted metal doors. The ones they couldn't control. Jack, always the bravest of the group, pushed open the doors without hesitation, revealing a long hallway lined with small, barred cells. The smell of burnt wood and something else, something foul, hit us immediately. I gagged, covering my mouth with my sleeve. "What the hell is that smell?" Megan asked, stepping back. "Maybe some animal got trapped in here and died," Jack offered, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. We pushed forward, peering into the empty cells as we went. Most were filled with rubble and debris, but one still had something inside. A rusted metal bed frame, chains dangling from its sides. I swallowed hard. This was wrong. All of this was wrong. Just as I was about to suggest we turn back, I heard it. A faint whisper, so soft I thought I might have imagined it. Did anyone else hear that?" I asked, my voice trembling. "No, what?" Jack said, swinging the camcorder around, trying to capture something, anything. A cold breeze swept through the hall, and that's when I saw it. A shadow, barely visible at the far end of the hall. It moved too quickly to be a trick of the light. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. "Someone's here," I whispered, barely able to get the words out. Megan grabbed my arm, her grip tight with fear. "We need to go," she said, her voice shaking. But before we could move, the door at the end of the hallway slammed shut with a deafening bang. We jumped, our flashlights flickering in the sudden darkness. The air grew thick, oppressive, and cold, so cold it felt like we had stepped into a freezer. "I'm done with this," Sam muttered, turning back toward the entrance. But the moment he did, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Slow, deliberate, and heavy. They grew louder with each step, closer with each second. "What the hell?" Jack whispered, his eyes wide with terror. I turned to run, but the footsteps stopped right behind us. For a moment, there was silence. Then a guttural, raspy voice filled the air, sending chills down my spine. "Get out." I didn't need to be told twice. We bolted down the hallway, our flashlights swinging wildly as we ran. The door that had slammed shut moments ago was now wide open, but as we approached, the wind picked up, howling through the building like a banshee's wail. We burst through the doors and out into the cold night, not stopping until we reached the safety of Jack's car. We piled in, gasping for breath, our hearts still racing. None of us spoke on the drive back to town. The only sound was the rain hammering against the windows and the distant rumble of thunder. It wasn't until days later that I found the footage Jack had recorded. I was curious, maybe we had just imagined it, maybe it wasn't as bad as it seemed. But as I scrolled through the video, I saw it. Right after the door slammed shut, just before the footsteps started, the camera caught a glimpse of something. A face. Twisted, contorted in agony, staring back at us from the shadows. As I stared at the screen, I felt my blood turn to ice. The face wasn't just a shadowy figure, it was detailed, too detailed. Sunken eyes, hollow cheeks, and a mouth stretched wide in an unnatural, silent scream. Its gaze seemed to pierce through the lens, as if it had been watching us the whole time, waiting for the perfect moment to make itself known. I couldn't believe it. My hands trembled as I paused and rewound the footage, hoping I was just seeing things. But no, it was real, and it was watching. I called Jack, my voice shaking as I told him what I had found. "You need to see this," I said. It wasn't just our imaginations. When he arrived, we watched the footage together. Jack's face turned pale as he saw the same twisted figure staring back at us. "That's impossible," he whispered. "We didn't see anyone there when we were inside." But the camera doesn't lie, and neither did the chill that settled over us as we continued to watch. The more we analyzed the footage, the more unsettling details we uncovered. In one frame, we noticed faint scratch marks on the walls of the asylum, almost like claw marks, leading into the darkness where the figure had appeared. None of us had seen them that night, but there they were, as clear as day in the video. And then, just before we ran, there was another sound, an eerie, guttural growl that sent a shiver down our spines. It wasn't human, that much we knew. After seeing the footage, none of us could shake the feeling that we had left something behind in that asylum. Or worse, that something had followed us out. Strange things began happening over the following days. Megan reported hearing footsteps in her house when she was home alone. Sam's dog refused to go near him, growling at seemingly nothing in the corner of the room. And every night, I woke up at exactly 3:15 a.m., drenched in sweat, the sound of that rasping voice echoing in my ears, "Get out."